Well, soulmates, it looks like I finally got the Marvel Legends 90s animated VHS Wolverine action figure. But is this one any good, soulmates, and is he worth your money? Be sure you stick around until the end, guys, because we're going to talk about what X-Men characters from the cartoon we want to see in this wave next. If you support what I do, please click subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss a single video of mine when it comes out. The way he's packaged inside this plastic-free packaging is a little jarring the first time you handle it, because what you get is the figure in a little baggie inside of some cardboard stock that holds it in place, and then there's another little baggie with all the accessories and stuff that's just kind of poked in there. And of course, what accessories does this one have? Well, he comes with an extra head, he comes with an extra set of hands, and he comes with the picture frame that he was holding in one of the episodes of X-Men the Animated Series. And the really cool thing about this photograph that you get is that you can take out the back of the picture frame and remove the Jean Grey and Cyclops picture, and you can put any picture you want inside of that. At no point did the picture frame feel like it was gonna fall apart on me, despite the fact that when you play around with it, it's pretty easy to remove the backing, and when I was placing it in his hands and stuff, it felt fine. It's kind of interesting to note that when you look at the picture frame, it has some texture on it that makes it look a lot like wood, and you know what? That's kind of a nice touch. Now, the downside of his accessories is that those extra hands that he comes with, they do not belong to Wolverine, and that is very much evidenced by the fact that they don't have the little metal bulbs on the top of the hand that Wolverine's claws come out of. Indeed, when you look closely at the fingertips of these hands, you can see that they have fingernails, and it's very obvious they just took someone's hands and made them blue. And that last accessory that he comes with, the snarling head, I actually like this a lot better than the standard head that comes on him, because when I took him out of the bag, he had his resting head on. And the thing about that was the way he was packaged. Once I took him out of the cardboard and out of the little baggie, the little tip of his mask was bent a small amount, and I tried to smooth it out a little bit to make it less obvious, but even now, after I played around with it so much trying to reshape it, you can still kind of tell that there's a little bit of a curl on the tip of the right side of his mask over there. Something that's especially curious on this action figure is that when I replace his head with the snarling one that I like a lot better, it's a tighter fit on the peg, and it's really hard sometimes to get his head to turn, but I'm still able to do it, and it's workable. It just feels a lot tighter than it probably should be. Let's take an aside and look at the cel shading on this one, because it's one of the main features on this line of X-Men action figures. And what shading we do see on him just looks strange to me, because you got these stripes that are kind of just running down the side of his leg on one side and the inside of his leg on the other leg, and then you got kind of just a big old spot on the side of his head. It's all so weird and doesn't feel like it makes a lot of sense. And then you go to his forearms, and there's some little stripes on there, but they don't really do anything on the boots. But, you know, then it appears on the side of his trunks and then the front of his shoulder pads. It's kind of all over the place, and it doesn't feel right. For the most part, this is the exact same Wolverine action figure we saw back in the Apocalypse wave. Is that necessarily a bad thing? Well, no, not really, because it does look a lot like Wolverine ought to look. But, you know, by the time we're seeing this action figure, a few things are in vogue now. By the time this Wolverine was revealed, pinless joints were very much a thing on a lot of different action figures, and also the torso swivel was a thing, because they're phasing out that waist joint. And on a character as big as Wolverine, I would definitely like to see an upgraded sculpt for him, because it feels like this sculpt by now is pretty outdated. Granted, I don't think they need to do all that much for Wolverine, because the design they have on him here is pretty decent. Like, he's got the butterfly joints, and those allow him a great deal of movement. And then you see his individual parts, and they add up to a character that looks really short, which is what you want from a Wolverine action figure. You look at his arms, they're nice and beefy. He's got little sculpt on there that indicate all the hair that he has on his arms, and that's a really nice touch, by the way. And also his boots feel really good. You can really sense the quality on those because they look like they're lived in a little bit, with some wrinkles going up and down each side of them. And then you can feel the little relief of the stripe that's going down the back and front of his boots. It feels really good, and I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of that on this action figure, especially concerning where the stripes are on his yellow suit. Because if those were raised up a little bit and they had just like that little edge on them that felt like they were stitched on or something, I think that would add a lot to the quality of the costume. If you're familiar with Wolverine's articulation, nothing here is going to be a big surprise. He has a lot of head movement. He can look directly up and down, and he can also bob his head from side to side a little bit. It's very easy to get his head to move around a great deal, fortunately. And the shoulder articulation feels really good too, and it offers him a great deal of range to get into all kinds of fun poses. The thing that gets me about his shoulder articulation, though, are the shoulder pads, because it feels really awkward to me. And the reason it feels awkward to me is the way they've handled these shoulder pads was to peg them into his shoulders, and what happens because they've done that is they can be pulled so that they're kind of just covering his shoulder, but they're disconnected from the rest of his costume, and it's not really aesthetically pleasing that way unless you move them around a lot to get them into position after you've handled them. Moving on, I think that my least favorite thing about this Wolverine was that he feels a little rubbery, and it was really hard to get him into all the poses that I wanted to get him in, because I was trying real hard to get him in a whole bunch of poses with Sabretooth, and I got out my first appearance Sabretooth, I got out my Series 5 Toy Biz Sabretooth, and I had a grand old time getting him posed up with Sabretooth, but getting him there was more difficult than I thought it should have been. Going back to the articulation for a second, one thing that really bothered me was that his ankles don't feel like they have a lot of play, and what I mean by that is that his feet really didn't go forward all that much, and because of that, it was even harder to work with Wolverine when I was making the poses that I just talked about. If his feet went forward just a little bit more, I think I would have been able to do more with him. The claws on Wolverine were about as good as they could be considering their design on the cartoon. And if you've ever watched the cartoon, you know that he doesn't really have the big blades on those claws that we see in a lot of comic book incarnations. They look very thin. They're more like, pig stickers than massive claws like we tend to see. In all things considered, these are pretty okay claws. They were a little bit misshapen out of the box, but that's something I've kind of come to expect on Wolverine action figures, and whenever I don't see it, I'm just pleasantly surprised. Now, does everything you get here reflect the price? Well, after handling the package and seeing the way that it's structured and everything that comes in it, it really doesn't feel like we get enough for what we're paying. Considering the nature of Wolverine, I don't know that there's a lot I would have liked to have had, but some accurate hands definitely would have been one, and then I really think that he should have come with an unmasked head, because we do see that a lot on X-Men the Animated Series. We see Wolverine take his mask off, and having that extra Logan unmasked head, as well as a little Wolverine mask hoodie to make it look like he just took his mask off, would be very nice. Is this one worth your money, soulmates? Well, it's definitely not the perfect Wolverine. It's not a horrible action figure, I just feel like there's so much on it that doesn't meet expectations that it really holds it back. And when you look at this one, you have to decide for yourself how comfortable you are with this particular version of Wolverine and how satisfied you're going to be with it as an animated version of this character, especially if you're a fan of the animated series. Because for what it's worth, he has a lot on him that makes him look like the cartoon. And if you're able to ignore that extra set of hands, Well, you've got yourself an action figure that looks a lot like the animated series. Well, soulmates, now that we've seen this Wolverine action figure, what X-Men character do we want to see in the VHS 90s animated line next? Well, I've said it before, I'll say it again, guys. I would love to see Magneto done, and I hope that they get to him at some point. I know that this line is going on hiatus for a while, but if it ever comes back, hopefully we'll see Magneto done, and hopefully it'll be a really, really good version of him. And you know, it would be pretty cool to see a Magneto action figure based on the costume that we've seen from the reveals of X-Men 97, where he has that crazy M on his chest that looks super cheesy, but you know what? I think it'd be really fun to get an action figure of him. Well, soulmates, what do you think of this 90s animated VHS Wolverine action figure? Is this one that you want to go out and get for your collection? Are you inspired now, or are you still on the fence and maybe you can't decide because you don't like some things about it? Or are you just not about this one at all? I don't know, guys. Let me know down in the comments, and be sure you let me know what X-Men character you want to see next. If you want to see my Spider-Man Retro Card Rhino review, you can check out that video here, soulmates.